lunch, we will go to our next portion of our meeting, which is our educational portion. Okay, our guest speaker tonight is Roy Tokunaga, one of the world's great orchid hybridizers. He grew up on Maui and attended the University of Hawaii, Manoa. His favorite mentor in the honors program, Dr. Yoneo Sagawa, introduced him to orchids and the emergent technology of orchid germination and cloning. After earning a bachelor's in education, he started work at an orchid cloning laboratory, E&R Orchids. For 7 years, he honed his skills in seed germination and cloning. In 1981, he partnered with Harriet Coffey to start H&R Nurseries in Waimanalo. He has been growing orchids and hybridizing, cloning, and germinating seeds for more than 47 years, maybe more. Roy is an accredited judge for the American Orchid Society and the Honolulu Orchid Society. For many years, he has traveled extensively, giving presentations at various orchid societies and many special orchid events. Tonight, we are privileged to listen and learn from Roy. Please welcome Roy Tokunaga. We're working, we know we have a toy speaker here, PA system, but we're working on getting a real one.
Wow, big society. I thought it was in a trunk since COVID. Got pretty big. Okay, so first question, I need to find out what kind of audience I'm speaking to. So how many of you would consider yourselves beginners? Just starting. Oh wow. One half. You grow a few plants in the yard, is that right? How many of you are advanced growers, like Ken? Only 2. Well, Milwaukee is an advanced grower. But not a member of the Kunia, I think.
He is.
He is? Oh, okay. So it's 3. So, one of the goals I had in giving talks, instead of talking about my hybridizing, which is fun, complex, or all the scientific things I like to get into, I've been trying to, how would you say, you get hot water, put some salt in it, you boil it down to its essence, so that hopefully it's understandable. Okay, so the talk today is, the title is The Catch of the Day, which means whatever happens to be blooming, I try and bring it down. The nursery is not open to the public, but we still have a list, a retail list, and you can find it online at hrnurseries.com. Let's see, I know my phone is going to ring because I did turn off the ringer. Oh, okay, good. At least the speakers didn't disrupt the meeting. Okay, so this time of the year, July, normally there's not much blooming except this one particular species called Rotonia. The original Rotonia that came out of Jamaica grows at sea level, very hot. It can take 100+ degrees. It can be dry for 3 months. They say in the dry season, not a drop of rain. And it grows near sea level. So I figured it's perfect for Hawaii Kai, where I come from. I live in Hawaii Kai nurseries in Waimanalo. The original color looks like this. Something of this color, sometimes a little darker. But every flower has no shape to it. I've seen hundreds being exported from Jamaica to the Miami area, and I'm looking for select forms out of literally maybe 2,000 or 3,000 plants I've seen. You're lucky if you find one with this kind of shape. Okay, so how did it come about? It's called selective breeding. So I say, okay, I have a goal. Start with something that looks like a propeller actually, very narrow segments on the petals. You make some seeds and select out the best forms, do it again and again. As you're doing that, all of a sudden you realize, once in a while, the plants throw you a new color. So you take the new color and you just line breed to try and purify the color. And after 45 years, I have all of these colors. The problem is, until 2019, I could barely grow this plant. They looked horrible. They're spotted. When we did put them in the laboratory, they looked fine. We take them out, and it was slow death. Less than 1% survived. It was really hard to sell anything, but I really loved the plant, so I kept working at it. If I had 1,000 plants in my nursery, a handful might be saleable in that they didn't have spots on the leaves, tip burns, yellow leaves. Well, I couldn't figure it out until about 2019. What changed is some friends of mine in Miami said, it's the water. You have to have pure water, only rainwater. And all the problems just go away. If I can add another to that, I was too aggressive in fertilizing. I used to give the plants 1 teaspoon per gallon every week. And most plants can take it, but the Rotonia hates it. So the last plants I have in my collection are in these trays. They're growing in my backyard in Hawaii. They get 4 hours, sometimes 5 hours of full sunlight, really hot. They're cooking out there. They only get city water, which can be a problem because it has a little salts in it too. So the plant is hypersensitive to all salts. Sodium chloride, fertilizer salts, it's a problem. So how do you fertilize the plant? Very little. So these plants that you see here are not the best plants I've ever seen, but they only got fertilized 4 times last year. Not only that, when I water, because I don't want the water salts to accumulate, I water the plants, then 10-15 minutes later, they're getting watered again, and as I pass by from a different direction, I water them a 3rd time. In the summer, I'm doing it every day. In the winter months, once a week. And the reason I have to do it every day in the summer is because it's so hot right now. It's really, really hot. I'm surprised that they're not dead, but that's how they like it. Okay, so the point is, every plant has a story. There's something particular about it that gives you, I'd say, a heads up on how to grow it correctly. Okay, so if I were growing this today, well, I would grow them only with rainwater. I can fertilize more, but I have to make sure that I keep the salt levels really, really low. Okay, so how many of you live in this area? Midulani, Waihawa. Okay. Anybody in the lowlands like me? That's a tough area. Okay. That's where watering is good. That's where the 3 passes, not one time, 3 different passes for watering. You don't have to water every day. But if you're going to water, you kind of have to give it 3 good waterings. okay, is so critical. That's how I'm growing most of my plants in Hawaii cotton. So I've been practicing now for about 6 years how to grow plants outside of my nursery. Sounds funny, but I didn't keep any plants at home in Hawaii cotton because they eventually went down and looked so bad they throw it away. That's how harsh it is in Hawaii cotton, which is like Ewa, Waipahu, Pearl City, the lower part, and so forth. When I talk on the other side, I ask how many people from Kahala and in Kamaki, 5 or 6 people. Kahala said, oh, we're in a really bad place, we should move. We can afford almost anything. My other joke, of course, Mel heard it 10 times, is I said, well, find out where Mel lives and buy the house next door. Somehow, some people are in really sweet spots, but it turns out all of Mililani is a sweet spot for growing orchids. Okay, so don't grow under plastic roof. Try and grow most of the time under shade cloth. It's much cooler. You can bring the plant under a solid plastic roof when it's in flower to preserve from damage from rain or botrytis or other things like that. But I ran an experiment in my nursery where I had distilled water, and then later I have what is called a reverse osmosis unit, which takes the salts out of the water and brings it down to almost nothing. Okay, so this one you can find in the store. It says steam distilled water. Okay, it's not the same as the filtered water. The steam distilled water is what people put in their irons, so that when you use your iron over and over, it doesn't leave all that white deposits. And that's the same white deposit the orchids don't like. So I would actually experiment with a little of this on some plants, and I found that I had bigger flowers. All strange things. I'll explain to Jan what I think makes a bigger flower. It's a little physics, but I'm not going to explain it. It was too long, right, Jan? And I don't think even Jan understood it. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to do on the capture the day is actually also show you that a couple of years ago, I was invited to speak in Kansas City. And they wanted me to put up a display and showcase some plants that they've never seen before. In other words, they don't want to see a phalaenopsis. They don't want to see, well, I didn't have any vandas, but they wanted to see vandas. They wanted to see dendrobiums, which is one of my specialties. Many of the shows I've gone to, I would bring some of my favorite plants, and they would come as cuts. But if I just take the stem, many plants won't last even a week. If I take the cane with the flower spike, I can sometimes get 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and sometimes up to a month and a half. But you still have to change the water, recut the stem, like any cut flower. This one is going to be a problem. What I notice is that if there's buds, some plants need a lot of energy, and this cane may not have enough energy in it to finish the flowers, but we'll see. Okay, now on the protonias that I was talking about earlier, let me finish that. The protonia started off with this color. Once in a while you make a lot of seeds, then you bloom something that's near white. Wilbur Chang, many years ago, came and brought in a plant that looked a lot like this one here. Except it was white and a little bit of color, like a flare. So he called it Star Splash. Plant was really hard to self-it, and the seedlings that come from it were harder to grow than that tiny plant he had that was so sad. So I took the plant, crossed it to a pink. We grew out a whole batch of the seedlings, the plants look terrible, but they flower. Okay, it's just I didn't have anything to sell, so they were in the nursery, and I just enjoyed them. So I crossed the Star Splash that he had with the pink. Let's see, I brought up. The plant broke off. Where did it go? Oh. The plant that Uber brought out of Jamaica was about this size. Okay, and it looked like this too. Shriveled, 2-3 bulbs. Okay, after I made the cross, it went bye-bye. The only trace of this plant was down in the seed that I had made. So you grow the seedlings, you sieve them again, and lo and behold, all kinds of colors started to appear. They don't even have these in Jamaica. I had to send some back so they could enjoy it. Okay, so now that I know how to grow it, I'm actually making seeds again, and it'll be a batch in a couple of years. So it's important because this is what Mel would like to see at the Ewa Show. The
Right.
season is June.
When you say SIB, can you tell our members what do you mean by that?
Oh, a sibling cross is you take two plants that are very closely related and you cross them like they're brothers and sisters, and you cross them, so they're sibling cross, we call it. And just for short, we sibbed it. But the problem is, yes, you do get inbreeding, but don't do it with humans. It's a bad idea. But with plants, you can do it, but you're always struggling with inbreeding. So the good thing about what I did is that I had crossed it to an entirely different strain, a light pink. And because of that, I had hybrid vigor, so the plants are much easier to grow. Then when I took the first generation and started crossing them back to each other, I could get the unusual color form to show up again. Okay, and then these were highly selected out of thousands of plants because they look very small. It's small little plant, it's 2-inch pot, they're all moving. You get to screen them, pick all the good ones. So I used to handpick the very best, sieve them again the next year, intensify the colors. The problem is very few plants actually made it into the marketplace. So at the Ewa Show, it's a rare commodity, but thanks to, most of my plants ended up with Hill and Bill. So they were selling it. Didn't have very many. Also, when we were slowly bringing the nursery down in size, accidentally sometimes instructions were given to the workers to get rid of a couple of benches. So I know one of my benches with hundreds of these select plants disappeared. If that got them sold, not too bad, but I think they just, because they look really terrible. Keep in mind, they look horrible. This is a beautifully grown plant by Jan. So and it's a good example of growing it. Good, Jan, let's hold your plant. This is Jan grew this plant down the hill. Okay, so in the rain, right? In the rain. Not too bright. I grow it really bright. She's growing it pretty shady. I was amazed at how shady she's growing her plants, and they're growing really, really well. And this is the alba form. So when you come up, let's take a look at the different color form. Also, I've been manipulating Floydie. So Jan said she's going to make hybrids herself so that in the future, Ewa and Kunia probably can have seedlings. So how many years is it going to take that you make the cross this year? The seed, and the flask, bring out. So I estimate in 6 years, Jan's going to have a lot of plants. Just check on Jan. You don't have to wait that long. I've been working on it since 2022, so they're in their 3rd year. I'm going to somehow get it out to the societies. So instead of those kind of plants for the giveaways that you see back here, hopefully 1 year I can just bring out a whole bunch of these Rotonias. The best way to grow them, do you have a tree in your yard with lots of light? You take the little plant, tie it on there, and it'll be really happy on the tree. The only problem is that some of the best plants I've seen, you would have to cut the tree down, take the stump, and bring it to the show. So be careful what you put on the tree. The best way to grow these plants actually is the way Jan had it in a basket. Okay, so many plants in this area can grow in baskets or in. As you get old, you come to realize things that don't really bother me. It's time to trip me. Is that part of getting old? One of the hardest things to do is grow a plant like this. It might be in a basket or might be on a mound, might be attached to a tree when the roots are fully exposed. 6 years ago, I couldn't do this. This plant wouldn't have any roots at all. It would be just a few short roots and that's it. And it will still flower. It bothered me that I just could not grow roots. Then what changed is the pure water, reverse osmosis. Here, this grows in the rain. And the rain will keep the root system from accumulating too many salts. If you are going to water with the city water, so what's the ppm on Milani water? You do a testing in recent time. 60. Okay, 60 is excellent. So Jen says she takes a reading on the tap water that you're getting. I know once she told me the high was at 20 something. Not you? 170? Was it you?
Normal whenever.
Somebody told me something like that. But anyway, in my house, last week, it was 220. At my nursery, it's right now at 136. It depends where it's coming from. All I know is that when it's really dry, 136 is too high. 60 is actually pretty good. Many, many years ago, in the 1980s, on a water test for my nursery in Manalo, the ppm, total amount of salts, dissolved salts in the water, was 70 parts per million in Manalo. So it has more than doubled over the years. And we just weren't tracking it, so we didn't know what the problem was, we didn't know what to do. Even if you knew what the number was. So I'm telling you, if you live in Hilonani, don't be worried. If you live in Ewa, you gotta get your ppm meter and check it because
It's almost 400. It's really high. And they have bromines in the water and fluoride and everything that isn't good for humans or orchids. But we have a hose filter, you see those on the outside, and I've tested a
I
lot,
have that.
and it does remove the
Yeah.
fluoride and the chlorine, so it helps a lot.
Okay. Yeah, go the other way, you have to.
But I do all my inside ones with RO.
Yeah, you can. Oh, all right. That's the best way to grow plants anyways.
How do you water that with RO? You have a system set up outside.
Yeah, this one is water only with RO. And fertilized every 2-3 weeks. The other plant is what I want. Okay, but normally what happens is I tell people that if you're not familiar with how to grow orchids, with this much roots exposed, it's very dangerous for a plant unless you really apply the water correctly. Okay, so if you're having trouble, always look at the roots. Okay, now going back to Kansas City. So, I said, okay, I'll come. And what I did was using Oasis. I've done international shows this way. What I do is I took pieces of the plants that were too big to ship to Kansas City. Besides, if they go to Kansas City, I can't get it back. So what do we try? And I made a 150 square foot display using all kinds of plants. Just so that they could see orchids. So, the question they gave me, because it's an AOS judge show, they asked me if I entered the display, a nice frivolous display. And of course I had to put tags on all the flowers and so forth, and nicely arranged. And I said no, because I had some live plants with pots and everything in the display also. It was a combination display with cuts, not exactly cuts, but the plants were there, plants in pot. And for some reason, under the American Orchid Society, it's not allowed. You can't mix cuts with live plants. So, no problem, I just didn't enter it. I said, it didn't matter. I just wanted to, highest priority, show things that they've never seen before. They were flabbergasted. This one here. See this curly thing at the bottom? The plant was, the cut was taken above my head. So whatever you see there is, plants can grow up to 9 feet tall. So every year, I go through and I trim my plants like this. I just take the top off. This is not too tall. My plants are actually growing in the ground. And they be attached to the stone wall. They may be on the bench. When you look, it's not only attached to the bench, but the roots go straight down into the ground and beyond. That's when they're happiest. So, they have a show. I'm not sure if you can keep all the plants in a pot, but if you can make provisions for it. People have plants in their yard that can't move, but they can take a piece of it, tag it, and label it. This can be judged for merit awards. It's just a display. They never have provisions for a combination of cut flowers, and you can have it all cut flowers, or you can have it all live plants, but not both. To be judged. Okay? So I'll just show you this. One of the rarest plants I have sitting in my nursery, I was looking up hybrids made in the past. So there's only a few people who might actually be able to decipher what this is. Two species. So Mel, what would you guess? The kind of strange things I make. But two species, primary hybrid. You have one in flask yet. You asked me for one in the flask. Huh? No, the flower off this album. Okay, the other parent is called Johnson. It's in the Latouria section. The problem is when you cross the Latouria Falmente, you can make a hybrid. They're very just in relationship, the plants are really tough to grow and unpredictable in their behavior. But I saw in the old text, someone had made a cross of Johnson with Red and they called it the Dendrobium bougainville. Couldn't even find a picture. So that's where curiosity comes to play. I said, oh, I can make it. Not only that, I can make it in the white form. Because I had the only thing I had was the Dendrophalaenopsis foreign. And I had a tetraploid Johnson foreign. So this is a tetraploid bougainville. So now, this is the plant trying desperately to cross through the blue thing there, Jacqueline Thomas. On the last process, I really hope someone will grow. So if I take bougainville, cross it to, okay? Remember the cross you had trouble with? The rising star? It was more like falling star. The problem was, the plants were beautiful flowers, beautiful plants, but they don't bloom very often. To me, that's a fatal flaw, so I don't repeat processes like that. I thought it was a fluke, so I did it again. Sure enough, I did it again. So, after 47 years of hybridizing, I learned that if you shift the percentage of the species, in other words, more Phalaenopsis in the background of the cross, or more Laturia to dominate, bloomability comes back again. Okay, so this is the plant. Need to cross to the Thomas and hopefully make the rising star flower, but easy to bloom. So how many can I sell you? One company. But anyway, that's the life of hybridizing. We make crosses, we have to sell it. So I know Jen will buy one for a month. Mel might buy one too. But you don't know what's going to happen during bloom, but it should be fantastic. Okay, so making displays. You said any of the names, I'll be happy to go over it. Most of my plants are growing in the yard. So how many of you have a problem with the bees? The bees come along and they pollinate the flowers. No bees out there? But they like this type of dendrobium. It's called the spatulata dendrobiums. This is Brobeliana. My problem is on the third day, they all start to, it's almost look like they're senescent. Get that one out. It looks like they're all like dying. That's all. Okay, I'll pass it on. What happens is the bees go in there and they pollinate it, and it's going to make a seed pod. It's going to look like this. And the seeds then spread all over the place, and they actually germinate. Becomes like a new weed. In my nursery, every dendrobium of this height, all the dendrobiums there are affected. So, they only have 3 or 4 days, so I have to make a decision before they get too much older. I have to cut this thing and bring it in the house. Over time, I've been looking for dendrobiums that bees either don't like, or they're so strong that the bees can't get into the pollen area. And it turns out, every year, Stradiotis flowers can be much bigger. So now, this is Hawaii pine. Okay, too dry. I was trying to explain to Jan that how to make a big flower. What you need is high humidity, lots of water, and probably cooler temperatures at night to get a bigger flower. So you have a fantastic advantage in the really lining, wide you are. The higher up you are, the cooler it gets. And many growers have noticed that the flowers are bigger. But temperature, they couldn't prove it temperature-wise. So I have a feeling it's something related to temperature, which is when the temperature goes down at night, you hit the dew point, so the humidity is actually going up. That high humidity helps actually to make a bigger flower too. It can also healthy root system, no salts in the root system, and I tend to water in the evening. So when I water in the evening, I get bigger flowers. Because I'm lazy at night, my plants at home get watered in the morning. And I noticed since I did that, the flowers got small. 20 or 30% smaller. So now we'll look at this and say, are you sure let's try this? It's rather pathetic. This flower is almost twice as big, right? Bigger? So I've been running experiments on how to make a bigger flower. So it turns out the aurora is very useful. By lowering the salts in the root zone, the plants can pick up more water and increase the pressure within the plant to blow up the flower like a balloon. Very, very subtle. Something somebody has to research. Write a PhD paper on it. Okay, any questions? Well, now's a good time to ask questions. Yes?
Regardless of the salt content of water, you wouldn't know why. I have RO water. I make it all the time. Would there be significant difference if I got away from the tap water and used RO water, or would be negligible between tap water and the RO water?
I would say in Iowa, if your TDS is close to 60, it's negligible.
Okay, this is no longer. Is it 60 here?
Yes.
Okay, so you say negligible.
If it's 60, you're right here? You're here. Okay.
Yeah.
It's negligible as long as you water thoroughly.
Okay.
If you took 60 ppm and you just wet the plants down to the point nothing goes through the root system, just wets the roots, yes, 60 becomes 120 after the second, 180 after the third watering, and so forth. Yeah, so in my nursery, we lack humidity. You have fantastic humidity here because they're coming over the cold rolls down, and I was dragging up, it was a beautiful rainbow too. You get the Mono mist coming down, which raises the humidity, cools everything down in the evening. And at night, you look up at clear skies sometimes, and it gets really cool, and dew everywhere in the morning. So in places where there's lots of dew, well, guess what? That's where orchids come from. In Hawaii Kai, I don't have dew. It's unknown. I'm lucky if I get it once in the year. Okay, when I used to work in a part-time job, working Ulupulakua, fantastic place on Maui, 4,000 feet. Okay, when I was my teens, early teens, 50 cents an hour. The job was to go find this noxious weed in cow pastures and take them out and make the cows sick. Okay. Because it's so hot in the summertime, we used to actually be up in the field at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I hated it because I got really wet. Morning dew in August. Every morning. Everything's wet. with morning dew, and it's really cold. Then about noon, it's hot, and you cannot believe how hot it is. Okay, any other question? That was a good question, yes?
So watering in the evening because it's so dry where you live and where Eva, you don't need to worry about fungus because it dries out overnight, or?
Okay, at my nursery in Waimanalo, I water in the evening. I have to put my headlamp on sometimes because I start too late, and I'm actually watering in the dark. I haven't had any fungal problems. The idea of watering in the evening goes like this. Orchids come from places where when you read about the habitat all over the world, the mornings are clear, cool, not a cloud in the sky. Then toward the afternoon, 3, 4 o'clock, thunderheads start to form, and usually rains toward the afternoon, and then the process repeats. So at night, it becomes clear again, and very cool in the morning with morning dew. The orchids have evolved a metabolism very unusual. All the orchid leaves have the same metabolism. If they have soft leaves, it's different. Cymbidiums are different. But Dendrobiums, Camellias, more or less, open their stomata at night. So in high school, everyone remember what the stomata are? I'm a biology teacher. That's my education at the University of Hawaii. To teach BSCS, the dreaded BSCS biology class in high school. They think hard. The stomatas are little openings, usually at the bottom of the leaf, sometimes on the top, but usually on the bottom. And they open, okay, for gas exchange. The gas that all plants need desperately is carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is what they need to start the process of photosynthesis. That's the other word everyone worked hard to forget. So CO2 plus water plus the energy sunlight, and of course it's catalyzed by the chlorophyll molecule in the leaf. Okay, captures the sun's energy, raises the energy in the carbon to make sugar. Okay, and the sugar is what runs the whole world. The limiting factor for plants is carbon dioxide. And the reason is, if they open their stomata all the time, they'll die of desiccation. Epiphytes, like orchids, have evolved to be very sensitive. So as soon as they dry a little, stomata's close. Not only that, they've evolved that they prefer to open their stomata at night when it's cooler. So if you grow the plants too dry at night, the stomatas may not open because now it's too dry, even though it's cooler. But the cooler will start to lower the humidity so that if the plant does open its stomata, it's not as stressed. It won't lose as much water. Okay, so the water loss from the stomata is a byproduct of trying to open up to get carbon dioxide. It's a different way of looking at it. Okay, so a lot of times in orchid culture, they have enclosed greenhouses like a building like this with grow lights. And they talk about one of the advantages is they can inject carbon dioxide 10 times what you get in the atmosphere. Okay, so I always thought that since we're global warming, we've increased carbon dioxide to over 400 parts per billion. It's unheard of. It's a huge amount of carbon dioxide in the air. So why is it orchids and other plants are still short of carbon dioxide? So when they did the research, you have to up it by another 10-fold to really get significant results. And it can be done. Okay, so how can you help the plant out? Well, so that when it opens, my orchids, I'm hoping when they open the stomata at night, they're wet. And the humidity is higher because I took the trouble of watering them correctly in the dark. Okay, if I water midday, it dries out so fast, I don't think they can pick up any of the water. Not only that, that drying is what worries me about the salts left behind that gets trapped in the roots. Okay, once the salts are getting trapped in the roots, it's very difficult to get it out. Okay, so all the research points to orchids being very efficient picking up fertilizer and salts, but if it picks up sodium chloride, that's the wrong kind of salt. It doesn't need it, doesn't want it, and it gets stuck. And it doesn't, most plants cannot excrete sodium chloride. So in my nursery, I'm poisoning my plants with my water. So by switching to oral, no problem. Okay, one good use of oral, so if you have combinations and you have some oral to use, the oral is the one you can mist the plants. Okay, so in my nursery, I do mist the plants, but it's with oral only. I'm really afraid to mist the plants with the city water. In my nursery, at 160 parts per million, it is pretty deadly. I'm so dry, really, really dry. Temperature is also a factor. I'm so much hotter than here. What happens is that the evaporative rate, if I'm trying to get a handle on that, the evaporation in my nursery might be 4 or 5 times higher than in your backyard. So in other words, what happens to me is much worse. So for example, if I were to use oral at 50 parts per million here, I would go once the membrane does break down after a while, so the ppm goes up and monitor it. People have told me that they use water with 50 parts per million, no problem at all. But they're maintaining high humidity. But 50 parts per million was not good in my nursery, so I have to change my membrane more often. So if I have a new career, new life, I would not build a nursery in Waimanaus. I would be on the Big Island at about 1,000 feet in elevation. I would be in Maui, Makawao. Haiku, where Mike Blitz is a sweet spot, really nice. He gets air that comes over, like you get air rolling over the mountain, 1,200 feet. Mike Blitz gets air rolling down from 1,000 feet. Fantastic place. But Waimanawa, not good. Okay, any other questions? I think I covered almost everything I like to cover. Another plant that blooms in the summer, so if Ewa, when I always have shows, we're going to find the source of Encyclia campensis, one of the few native orchids to Florida. This is, someone told me that this is a progeny from a plant that was collected near Tampa. So apparently it can take hold, and it was growing in pine trees on private property, so you're allowed to harvest a few plants. So he was selling it somewhere, and I was like, wow, I need something that really came from Tampa, since it's named Tampensis. This is the alpha-form. Jan brought another alpha-form. Oh, Jan's plant is here. I'm growing it in an empty basket. Jan is growing it in a clay pot very nicely. Okay, so there's one way to just do the same thing. Can be going very, very well. I would say Jan's plant looks healthier than mine. Okay, so I just hang the plant out. I'm not even sure what's inside. 40 years later, it's still going. Okay, nice fragrance. There's a bee that pollinates it, so some years I get lots of seed pods. Okay, so very slow growing. It's one of the most difficult to execute out of the laboratory. So I'm trying again. I just want to, because I've never done it with the oral. I'm positive I can do it with reverse osmosis. What happens is plants come out, they don't like to be in media, they actually prefer to grow in nothing. In nature, they're growing on just trees that are really, really dry. It's amazing how they even start up. That's it. So do you have, let's see, prizes for the best plants?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so how many?
We have 6 total.
Okay, about 6 plants.
Okay, and the rest is lucky number.
And then the lucky number, your way of calling out?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so I'm gonna line up a whole bunch of things. Don't take my stud plants.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm gonna lay out some plants and, okay, so. One good thing, one of the giveaways is an epidendrum that looks like this. It likes to have roots almost like a basket coming out, so you can grow it very airy. I'm going to repot one plant so you can come up and take a look at it later. I have a mutant Grammatophyllum. Normally it's a big plant. And Renton Road started it, and he had these plants that were blooming pretty small. The problem is the plant always looks terrible. It puts all of its energy into flowering continuously, non-stop. But the plant looks terrible. And many times it doesn't throw any roots. So I've been trying to figure out how to get this plant to at least form normal roots. This is what it should look like. So it's in the basket, it's almost nothing. And the roots, it forms up like a basket. Okay, so. And I'm going to lay out some net pots. I brought some net pots. You can get it from Simplot. And I'm going to lay it with the plants that need it. So whoever takes roots, takes one of the epi or the Grammatophyllum, you're going to try and grow it in this thing here. So while we're getting the drain out, repot plants, you want to see how I repot? I'll show it to you up here.
Thank you, Roy, very much for your contribution tonight. I wish I had paid attention to biology. No, I was only thinking about the rules, I guess, and sports. But thank you, Roy. We're going to take a short break right now.